let's hit it. Good afternoon, happy BSides Las Vegas. What's going on? What's up? What's up? Y'all tired? You been partying? All right, wait, you got a party tonight, don't forget. Need to get that nap in. All right, so we are here today with Ez Tauhan about context is all you need, what alerts, events, and logs are relevant to each other. So before we get started, we have to thank the money bag. So thank you, Adobe, and all the other great sponsors that we have here, and all of our volunteers and staff and speakers, and you, right? It's all for us. So without further ado, Ez does want questions. If you have any questions, raise your hand. We're gonna do this interactive. It's gonna be fun. We gotta wake up, okay? So let's go, Ez. What's up?
Sweet. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. My name is Ez. Before we start, I want to do it as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, please don't be shy. Raise your hand or just shout out the question right away. And even before we start, if everybody could kind of like just give me a quick poll so that I'm not talking to like different audience. Anybody here did something in the SOC before or like some blue team? Okay. A lot. Okay, that's fantastic. The other people that are not in blue team, can you just shout out either like you're interested in like what kind of area? Like it's fine if you're a student and you're just like a generalist, you can just shout out generalist. But if I can just get a quick poll, like what are you into? So I can kind of like cater to your interests as well.
Purple team.
Purple team. All right. More purple. All right. Anything else? All right. Okay. Wow, this is a fantastic room. None of the compliance folks, none of the...
Compliance gets me to test everything.
Right. All right. Any students? Any generalists? Okie dokie. All right. So a little bit of an agenda. So I'm going to start with a quick who am I, so that you know who the hell am I. And then I'll talk a little bit about the challenges in the industry as a whole from security operations. But since you're already practitioners, I'm probably just going to breeze into that. I will probably put a lot of time into the analysis challenges, like what is actually hard in our job today as people in the SOC. And then I'll talk a little about attack, but you guys are probably experts in this area, so I don't know how much time is going to be spent there, probably not that much. And then we're going to talk about the investigations and the model of investigating that talks about the what, the when, the who, and how can we automate things a little. Go for it. That was a good one? Okay. And then we're going to talk a little about some models in machine learning. I know everybody is all about machine learning. I am a data scientist, so I'll probably bore you with a lot of machine learning, just as I get my mic set up. And we'll talk a little bit about examples, and we'll talk more about questions as well. All right, I will not jump into the screen. Okie dokie. All right, a little bit about me. I'm a data scientist that works in the SOC. I have a bunch of SOC experience, but I have more experience in the data science area than in the SOC. So you're probably more experts in the SOC side. So if I say something that is kind of like, this guy's not really covering everything, don't be shy. I would not get offended. Shout it out or raise your hand and be like, by the way, that's not really how we do it. That's a better way to explain it. And that would be fantastic because I want this to be as interactive as possible. But I worked in the SOC as a data scientist in Royal Bank of Canada, Orange Cyber Defense, Huawei, and Forescout. And that's about it. All right. A little bit of a general kind of statement in cybersecurity is it seems like things keep on getting worse. And I'm not sure why. If you remember, like 10 years back, we thought like Stuxnet was bad. Nowadays, I don't know how bad was that, right, compared to the stuff that happened. But it seems like as if attacks are getting better and even more stealthier than they used to be and harder to detect. And it seems like we have more alerts than ever before hitting our SOC. And it seems like we also have a lot more tools. So why are attacks getting more successful? Some people seem to say that it's probably just bloated and ineffective, but some people are just saying that, you know what, systems just got less secure. And if you think about that, are systems actually less secure? I mean, we have the fact that back then things were simpler, and now things are like crazy complicated. I mean, even in ICS, things were super simple to pull off Stuxnet, for instance, or Colonial Pipeline or whatnot. Things were very different back then. While Colonial Pipeline was like a little bit easier than Stuxnet, right? And that's because like the networks have more attack surface, right? So back then, Stuxnet was completely air-gapped. To do anything there, you had to circulate the virus for 2 years around planet Earth until someone, by mere chance, gets that virus on their USB and plugs it in. Now, you don't really have to do all of that. There's like smart grid. There's like, I don't know, 5G, ICS kind of mobile edge cloud and whatnot. There are so many attack surfaces, and that means that we have a lot more attack vectors to pull off. So anyways, what that takes us to is everybody in the SOC does not mind any kind of automation. They actually welcome it more than anything else. This is one of the few industries where you go and you talk about automation, and people are like, yes, give me more. Please take my job. I don't want to secure this job ever. Like, please take it. Give me another job. And according to the SOC survey that is pulled off by SANS, and I don't know where do you stand on SANS. I mean, I'm kind of biased because I'm on the GIAC advisory board, and I paid them a lot of money, so I feel like they're good. But they do this report, and they go out to all the people in the SOC, and they ask them, what's the biggest problem that you think is out there? It's a pretty good report if you want to read it. It's called the SOC survey by SANS. And it seems like most people just point to this idea of my investigators. They take a lot of time, and their job is pretty hard, and their investigations are very inconsistent. And all of that is to chase this dream of correlating stuff. Like, I just really want to understand what is relevant to a ticket without having to like jump into hoops and whatnot. And that is coming at a time where we have all of the data that we need, ideally, in a single place, either logically or technologically. It might be the SIM, it might be whatever you want to call it, but we have a bunch of alerts and events and logs throughout our organization. Ideally, we have a good coverage, but even if we don't, we have a pretty decent coverage in most cases. And we have all of that in one place. And the way we deal with it is we actually have a lot of lookups. So we actually go in there and we look up what could be relevant to an alert. So if I get, I don't know, like some sort of an ADR alert, I go in there and I look up what is going on, what could be relevant there, and so on and so forth. We can use Sigma rules for things like that in terms of detection rules, or what they call correlation rules, or analytical stories that have a lot of rules that look for things that are relevant. And in this case, the rule is simply looking for command kind of strings via some sort of like a query language or regular expression that finds these in web traffic. So it's a very straightforward detection rule. And we like Sigma, because Sigma is like a unified language and things are beautiful. We also like what they call investigative playbooks. Anybody familiar with investigative playbooks? Not as many. Okay, let's quickly jump into what is an investigation playbook. So there is an open source thing from Splunk called research.splunk.com. If you quickly go there, you will find all of the open source content from Splunk. So you'll find detections, analytic stories, and playbooks. This is obviously not the only place to find this, but it's just one of the bigger repos out there with information like this. So if you can select like investigation playbooks, you can essentially look at investigative playbooks. So for instance, here is a playbook that, I don't know, like I don't know, there's like identifier activity analysis, there's like internal host SSH, there's like what do you do when you find like an email, what do you do when you find like a threat intel hit, what do you do when you find something like that. And if you click on any of those, like for instance this case, once a user or device is involved in something, it will go and it will look up the attributes of that. So that's already something that an analyst has to do. Like when you find an asset is involved in some sort of an investigation, you better know what kind of business unit, you better know what kind of IT leader, what kind of manager is handling it and stuff like that, ideally through a CMDB. But if you don't have it, you can also do just a live lookup for it. And anyways, this is kind of like the playbook. You can kind of like see the exact, I guess, JSON of it on their GitHub. So all of this is completely open source, as I said. None of this is to kind of like, none of this is charged. And a lot of people actually take this content and they repackage it via Sigma or other kind of like source or whatnot. And it's pretty common out there that we have this kind of investigative playbooks. However, I would like to pause here and ask, anybody from the folks that are around here do investigations today? And if so, what is kind of the guideline? Can you speak up?
Yeah,
some sort of like an investigation that once I have an ADR alert, how do I know what is relevant to it?
Yeah, I mean, we use a platform called Logarithm. It has playbooks on it, and those playbooks will tell the analyst, steps to do, and it measures the time between the steps so that we can get MTTR, MTTD type stuff.
Is that enough, or does the analyst do a little bit more of a lookup?
That's an aptitude thing of the analyst. How curious are they? How much do they want to impress? So it's a challenge.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else wants to share a little about how do they do investigations, or how do they find what is relevant to an incident? You can shout it out. But is it mainly just playbooks and lookups, series of lookups, and then anything other than that is completely? Are there guidelines for pivoting? So when you say like a human could be curious, got it. So it seems like a lot of it is really up to the human acumen, and we call that process a hypothesis and validation. So they look at something and they're like, you know what? I hypothesize that this is a lateral movement. Let me go and figure out if it's actually a lateral movement, or if it was just like a drive-by. And I have to go and I figure that out. And how do I figure that out? I have to retain this acumen and knowledge that I have about the environment, and then I have to go there and look for things that are considerably enabling to a lateral movement. So if you remember in the MITRE attack, we actually have like tactics. And I would be looking at the tactics before the lateral movement, trying to find something that kind of answers that question. Was it a lateral movement? Did I see credential discovery? Did I see something in the area of maybe execution or persistence beforehand, and so on and so forth? So this is the state of art today. It seems like we're highly dependent on the human. And unfortunately, humans don't have a very good consistency. So even if I'm an amazing analyst, one day I'm feeling like it, one day I'm not. It's very hard to judge me on my quality of a ticket to promote me or to demote me. You'd probably just judge me on time. So you mentioned MTTR, MTTD, right? Like just time. So do you want more tickets? I got you. Yes.
I want to add that we also battle the confirmation problem.
Right.
They see it, thinking they see evil, and then they find logs to support their evidence instead of looking at the evidence for what it is, right?
Interesting.
And that's another problem, because then you're chasing ghosts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So to rephrase that, a lot of the time, it seems like people might end up chasing the wrong stuff, and that means that their hypothesis and validation train of thought might lead them to essentially chase nothing, and essentially waste very expensive time on the job and lookups and threat intelligence discussions and pinging users and whatnot after absolutely nothing while leaving the good stuff. So it seems like we lack some sort of structure. We lack some sort of a methodology there. And that's really some of the reason that we don't really have a lot of good tools to support these analysts and these investigations. The best we have in terms of tools in this industry is maybe use an LLM and hope for the best, but an LLM is a magic black box, and I don't know how useful it is, but we can, we can actually take it on and ask an LLM what does it think of something, and see how would that work out. So I have one of the best, or one of the most popular LLMs out there, and if I ask it, I have an EDR alert about privilege escalation in a process on Windows 11 at my HR department. What do you think I should investigate in terms of relevant events, alerts, and logs in my SIM? The LLM would give me highly non-deterministic answers. Every single time you hit up an LLM, its creativity configuration, or what they call a temperature, is usually set up to a pretty high value, which means that a vanilla LLM would give you a different answer every single time you prompt it with the exact same stuff. So I had no clue what would come up But essentially, a big issue that we have there is we're never really too sure what it will spit out. So we try to guardrail it. We try to have configurations, like you can easily use an OLAMA, for instance, and have a local llama where you can drive down the temperature. Instead of ChatGPT, you can probably use Hugging Chat. So I can go here to Hugging Chat, where I can have some more configurations set up, and I can make an assistant. So in this case, I have an assistant that I built for this. And you can see that in this assistant, if I edit my assistant, I see essentially what kind of configs I gave it. So in this config, I can kind of like drive down the temperature to 0, all the way to 0. And in this case, or maybe 0.1, it doesn't even allow me to go to 0. In this case, it's as less creative and as more deterministic as possible. So what that means is, if I give it the exact same prompt, it's kind of deterministic to a certain degree, more than others. And in that case, I can really depend on what's going to spit out, and I can have an actual experiment figuring out our LLM's going to help me. But I'm kind of jumping the gun. I'm going towards essentially what kind of solutions are out there, but this is just a little bit of a brainstorming bit. So we figured that a lot of things relate back to the attack methodology. So you probably already all know about attack. If you don't know, the attack methodology seems to be always referenced where possible because it allows us to figure out what is the answer to the what question. So when you look at an alert or an investigation, you're going after who, when, and what, remember? So the what is usually referenced via some sort of a framework or some sort of a knowledge base that allows me to have a common language for what is happening and answer that what. And we use the attack methodology for that. Just a refresher, going left to right, there is more causality or sequentiality. And then these are different techniques. The value of having this is obviously if I'm a junior, I don't have to be a unicorn at your SOC because we don't have a talent shortage, we have a unicorn shortage. There's a shit ton of people that would love to take a job at your SOC, but you don't accept them because they're not unicorns. But if you had essentially a nice methodology and a nice guideline where everything has MITRE ATT&CK, you can actually have them read the mitigations and detections and procedural examples, and they can kind of perform above their pay grade. However, another problem in this industry is the MITRE ATT&CK labels that we have are usually non-consistent because guess what? All of the detections, playbooks, and whatnot have very, very different authors. Most of these authors put the attack just for marketing. They don't really put it for operations. They put the most broadest technique that they can find or a tactic, and it's not really very good. So one of the things that we should probably do in a SOC is try to make sure that we have a consistent attack technique. What can help there? Probably natural language processing. An LLM is a good place to start. So you can easily go to Hugging Chat or OLAMA or whatnot, find a nice model, give it a few resources, try to figure out how to get a nice, essentially attack label out there, populate it in a nice sheet, and now you have this sheet that allows you to map everything consistently, every single unique alert or signature or whatnot to a technique. And that is what I would do. So I would use some sort of like a free thing, and we built a free bunch of these that essentially they have a nice system prompt, they have domains that can help them find out these kind of things. And we built these domains, essentially like a list of domains that has all of the stuff that it would need to look up what is the nice technique there. It might not be the best, but it's consistent. So that's essentially the piece that you want to focus on when you're figuring out what's what in terms of an answer. But anyways, you can very easily pull this off. If you're not familiar with OLAMA, you can also have a local one. Hugging Chat can also be set up offline, but you still have to trust Hugging Chat with your data, yada, yada, yada. But again, you only need to feed the deduplicated or unique alert messages and descriptions. That's it. So really nothing sensitive out there. It's just a rule set that you use in multiple source types. And that's really about it. And you would have some sort of a consistent technique. So let's assume that we have a consistent technique. We were talking about an investigation. Go back to the point as, what the hell are you talking about? So about that investigation, attacks usually are not a single incident, right? They're usually a coordinated kind of story. And when I'm talking about give me relevant data points, ideally, if you remember, we were kind of hypothesizing, is this a lateral movement? We were going back and we were looking for discovery, credential access, defense evasion. Do I have any hits? Do I have any actual coverage of what happened in these tactics? And if I do, I can kind of like stitch it up in what MITRE calls the attack flow. Anybody here familiar with attack flow? Take care, Gabe. You are familiar with attack flow. We got 2 people, 3 people. Okay, 4 people, all right. For those that are not familiar with attack flow is a nice project that Gabe was one of the people that actually worked on it. I know he's running out, but thank you for working on that project, Gabe. That's a pretty cool project. So if you want to take a look at the project, a quick way to look at it is essentially, let's say, Equifax. Equifax was a big breach that happened in 2017. Half of the people in the US have their SIN numbers, addresses, date of births out there in the dark web somewhere. So if you suffered identity theft after 2017, this is why. But essentially, I can see the story. I can see it started with vulnerability scanning, and then this happened on a vulnerability scan in one of the, I guess, online dispute portal, seems like it. They had an Apache Stratus web framework vulnerability that was exploited out there, and then there was a web shell, and then after the web shell, there were like some credentials harvested on that machine. Wow, there were credentials on that machine. And then there was an encrypted channel where they queried some databases. There was like archiving of the data probably for exfiltration, and yep, there was exfiltration. And exfiltration used a proxy to make it harder, and then they deleted their traces. Yep, they deleted Windows event logs and files and whatnot that they left. Okay, so essentially the attack flow is a way for people to, instead of just read an APT note or an APT report, now you actually have the tactical, not really fully tactical, but a little bit of operational knowledge of what happened, and you can see the sequence out there. So it's just a nice way for the community to talk about these kind of sequences that they spot. So anyways, if we were to have a little bit of a task force, a little bit of a workshop, and on our Innovation Friday, try to make things better, you gather the team, how can we make things better? How can we make next week better than this week? And they say, you know what, let's actually action some sort of innovation and make our incident investigation better. Like, can we augment our playbooks? Can we augment our rules? Let's think, how can we do it? So one of the first steps would be like the who, when, what. And when you talk about what, we already talked about, let's figure out a consistent way to put MITRE ATT&CK techniques. MITRE ATT&CK techniques is a good place to start. And let's use some sort of a natural language processing to get that figured out. And if we do, we have a nice CSV with it. We give it to the SIM, boom, everything in the SIM now has it. For the who, ideally, we also have some sort of a CMDB. If not, we can also make some sort of a CSV of here's a service account, here's the account business unit, here's the whatever, and again, give it to the SIM to enrich things automatically for you. And now your tickets already have like entity information as well as what is going on information. So that's the first step in terms of MITRE ATT&CK. Enrichment for the events. And then ideally we have some sort of entities attributes that we kind of figured out. And ideally we want to use these in a similarity fashion. So what is similarity? Usually in the SIM, you don't have such thing as a similarity. In a SIM, you only have a common characteristic. So what is a common characteristic? Well, this and this share the port. This and this share the OS. This and this share the parent process. This and this share the business unit or the subnet or whatnot. But is there a similarity? No. We don't really have any similarity. We have identicality. Do they share something or do they not? So ideally, in a common practice like this, we have an algorithm that helps us with similarity. What kind of similarity? Like port 80 and port 81 are kind of similar, right? Process, Internet Explorer, and I don't know, Edge are kind of similar, right? It might not be straightforward that it's similar, but if we get some sort of a model that tells us what is similar, we unlock a lot more nicer enrichments, right? So I'm going to pause here. Any questions on this kind of train of thought? The what, a little bit more on the what in terms of similarity, and then the who, and a little bit more on expanding the what and the who in terms of similarity. And ideally, the output, of course, is find me stuff that is related. Find me stuff that is relevant. Any questions? If not, I can fly through the rest. All right, we go to the fun part. So MITRE ATT&CK techniques. We talked about let's classify events with the relevant attack techniques. We use an LLM. How do we do that? We get any kind of LLM. We give it some sort of a fine training, small labeled corpus if we can. If we cannot, we just trust it with an unlabeled corpus, and we give it some essentially websites that it can look up. And we can essentially just quickly pull something like this out on AWS and put it in a little SageMaker. And the output is actually pretty nice. So here we use a small BERT, nothing too crazy, not really a big LLM. And it's actually pretty decent. Like, it's actually pretty decent. It's not that hard. And you can get a CSV out of this, and it immediately enriches your SIM. The second part is kind of interesting. So first, we're going to take this as a big data problem. I have 10 terabytes that come to my sim every day. I cannot feed this to an LLM. Never. I can feed it to an LLM. So what am I going to feed it to? I'm going to feed it to a classical machine learning algorithm such as clustering, which is very easily understandable, very easily explainable, very easily auditable, which is very important, and transparent. An LLM, I cannot really understand why it did something. Clustering, I can. So clustering events, that's what I'm going to go after. And I'm going to cluster them based on similarity in the characteristics of the event, as well as characteristics of the attributes of the entities involved. So if it affected two people that are kind of similar, I need them to be in the same ticket. If the events are kind of similar, I need them in the same ticket. And ideally, after I have these clusters, of course, I can stitch them based on sequentiality, because guess what? I have the technique and the tactic. So I make some sort of a basic data structure. In this data structure, I can kind of highlight what I need to be the nodes, which is how this data structure is going to index things for my clustering algorithm. And then I just feed this data structure to what we call an embedding algorithm. Usually, if you don't have a complicated data structure, you can pull this off with a very straightforward clustering algorithm without doing this kind of data structure. But if you have the time, if you have like a summer intern or something like that, or if you actually have like a full Friday, you can do this as your step 2. Your step 1 would definitely just be a basic data structure, like tabular format. But if you can do this, it makes your life a lot easier. And the connections are actually after what you want. Because while you're designing this, you're saying a node is CVE. Now, my clusters are going to be related by CVE. Or maybe a node is simply an entity. Now, my clusters are based on entities involved, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, you can chain things around with what we call a Markovian logic, essentially. So this is a finite state machine. We call it Markovian, essentially, models just because we make it fancy, but it's a finite state machine. And I can easily go to my ChatGPT again. I can generate this code. And by the way, I already generated it. It's sitting on my GitHub. I will have the links ready for you. But essentially, make me Python to cluster alerts with 10 event attributes and 5 entity attributes, right? So, and it will now just show me the entities that it will make. It will show me the essentially alerts in a very tabular format. So these are the 5 attributes for the alerts. They're encoded numerically. You can encode them in whatever way you want. And essentially, you can also get the entity attributes there, and you can choose a model. So the model could be dbScan, k-means, whatnot. You don't have to be a data scientist. You just have to actually deal with this the same way you're not a combustion engineer, but you drive a car, right? Like, you just deal with it. Like, how do I use it? I have this can spit out code at me. Let me try a few things. Let me hack around. We're hackers. Consider yourself in a hackathon one Friday and pull this off, and you would be astonished at how easy you can provide humongous value in this area. And again, the code is out there. We have a blog about it. This is what we got. So we fed about 2,000 alerts, just a quick kind of playground that we got. The ground truth for this was 1 cluster. And then we found 8 clusters. And actually, all 8 were kind of interesting. So our ground truth was broken because we didn't know that one of the firewalls was kind of like letting Shodan and other bots online do stuff. So we didn't look for these. But these were actually true. When we looked at them, we were like, oh, interesting. OK. So essentially, in this case, you have this kind of architecture where you have a couple models, one that gives them tactics and techniques, which can be just once in your life via an LLM, make a CSV. And then once everything has a TTP, it doesn't matter what kind of data format it came in. You can also have one of our models that we open sourced, allows you to immediately switch any data format into a common data format via an LLM. And you can have a unified data model that can go into like some sort of a flow or clustering detector. And you can get things chained up very nicely. So again, the idea is to put out attack flows. Ideally, you're clustering stuff, you're correlating stuff, and then you just put it in a flow. And usually the first step is just know the causality via uncovering techniques. Here are some of the screenshots that we did. So here's the data that we fed. We fed a shit ton of those. And immediately the cluster would look something like this. So these are all of the IPs of the stuff that is relevant. Here are the entities that were involved. Here are the techniques that are involved, and so on and so forth. And here are some internal users or internal IPs that we marked. And obviously, it's so much better than the current stories and rules, but it augments them because they are better at certain things, and you want to augment them. You don't want to replace them. How is it easier to adapt and maintain? You can easily go and mark in the cluster what do you not like and what do you like, and immediately the cluster algorithm would learn how to cluster things the way you like it, without you explaining too much or writing a rule. It's actually more efficient than a rule, because the more you have of these playbooks and lookups, the sim is going to be slower. So if you hear people complaining or ranting about, oh, you know, QRadar is so slow, man. Like, I want to move to like Splunk or something like that. You immediately ask them, like, how many lookups do you have on there? Like, how many continuous searches do you have on there? Like, how many playbooks do you have that are constantly hitting it with searches? Like, if you go in the jobs in Splunk, you can have a lot of jobs. But usually when you transition into a new sim, you don't take any of these rules with you. So like 3 years later, you're again like, oh, Splunk is so slow, man. Like, so that's what I see a lot. And then the nice thing is it's standalone. So the leadership changes the sim. They change the EDR. Your clustering thing that you worked on a little with your intern or in your Friday, Innovation Fridays or whatnot, is going to live with you for the rest of your life. And yeah, you can correlate via nuances, and that's the similarity piece, because clustering takes in consideration similarity. It actually looks at semantical similarity of Kevin and Kev, or HR and corporate safety. Like, these are actually similar. But if you have a rule or a playbook, it's just looking for a match on business unit, and that's it. But yeah, that's essentially the idea. A lot of buzzing alerts. Ideally, just put them all together. This is a UI that we built. A lot of this is available on our GitHub. But essentially, ideally, your false positive ticket looks something like this. So you already have the sources and whatnot. You have the resolution in the comments. And if you already have these tickets historically, let's talk about how do we do this via supervised learning, which I couldn't put into this discussion because this is just unsupervised for people that don't have historical tickets. But if you have historical tickets that you can trust and you can be like, you know what, my tier 3, my senior guy, I trust this guy. Any ticket that this guy closed, I can use to train a supervised learning model, to notice what is a false positive, to notice what's a nice investigation to do, to just show the analyst today what are relevant tickets, and they can just quickly skim through them and be like, oh, yeah. This is the vulnerability scan that happens every quarter for compliance, and every single time it's marked as a ticket, but this is obviously false positive, because every time I just ring up this guy, and this guy's like, yeah, this is our vulnerability scan, or this is our pen test, or this is, oh yeah, the accountant keeps on going every quarter to pull up financial metrics for the management. Like, this is the exact same thing every single quarter. If I have these tickets, like the attack story tickets or whatnot, even the coordinated tickets, like the APT stuff, if I have them historically and I feed them to a supervised model, I can teach my new generation of analysts how historically good human acumen did these investigations if I have it. But if I don't have it, unsupervised is your friend, natural language processing, clustering, and the rest is history. But yeah, these kind of things augment your playbooks. I want to leave a lot of time for Q&A, so throw it at me if you have it. There's a lot of stuff in that ticket. These are the links for the Hugging chat assistance that I built for this. There is a gist here that I kept for you guys that has some of the clustering algorithms. So this is one. You can immediately just go to this. It's public, and it does essentially what the ChatGPT did. Like, it's just a little fancier. And then you can see the clusters, essentially like what alerts or what incidents or what logs or what events are kind of clustered together. And just to remind you, these are coming from heterogeneous source types. They're not even the same data model. None of it is similar. But we are still able to kind of like get the overall essentially similarities in there. But anyways, any questions? I need a lot of questions. Go for it.
Just a moment.
Oh yes, thank you. I was thinking I gotta go there. Thank you, I appreciate it.
How much do you trust ChatGPT to transform the data into a common model?
I don't trust ChatGPT one bit. The whole demonstration was starting with ChatGPT and then immediately saying what's wrong with it. So the only reason I brought it up is it doesn't have temperature control on the UI. So don't use it in the UI for anything serious. Brainstorming is amazing. Quick code snippets are nice, but I wouldn't use it in the UI. The API, you can access the temperature. For some reason, the UI, you cannot access the temperature. So if I'm in your shoes, instead of ever using ChatGPT, I would install OLlama and have a local instance. Or if you don't care about it being local, I would use Hugging Chat. So I would immediately go here to Hugging Chat through Hugging Face, and I would go to Assistants, and I would create a new assistant, and I would call it whatever, test, and I would choose a model that I want to play with. I can choose 1 million of them, and I would drive down the temperature as far as it would let me. So in Mistral can go to 0. I would do that. Because if I'm being serious about anything, I don't want it to be creative. I'd rather have it be wrong and me knowing that it's strong in this use case and it's not good for this use case. So 0 temperature means 0 creativity, and it stops giving you non-deterministic outputs. It's highly deterministic. Same input, same output a million times. Thank you. %.
Hey, great talk.
Thank you.
2 questions. The first one being, you talked about unlabeled data, but how often have you found that the MITRE tactics and techniques are mapped accurately enough to provide a strong signal for doing some of the similarity searches? That's the first question.
Should I answer it first?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so when we started training our LLM to do this, we gave it all of the stuff that we pulled and scraped from GitHub from different rule sets, and people have already given them attack techniques. Immediately it performed really, really bad, and when we investigated it, we found that the data quality was not consistent, and we were like, yeah, of course, it's crowdsourced data, what the hell did we even think? So we scrapped all of that, and we had 2 choices, to either like sit down and make our own fine-tuned and make sure that our people are consistent, which means you hire the same person, and the same person should write regular expressions to check their consistency, because every day they're acting differently. And we did that, but that was ridiculously expensive, and I wouldn't tell you to do that. You could just trust unsupervised like an LLM and just hope for the best. Because it doesn't matter what quality you have, literally. It just matters that it's consistent. If it's consistent, you're good to go. And actually, in your rule sets today, if you go to your sim, and in Splunk or whatever, you just type in, like, after you do like an index all, and you do like a dedup per message, how many messages do you think you have in your sim in the last 3 months? Like maybe 1,000 different unique ones? You can probably just sit down and manually do it. You don't need an LLM, but an LLM would give you a quick and dirty draft of it. But short answer, TLDR, I don't trust any of the stuff that's out there in terms of techniques, because they do it for marketing. They actually don't use it for operations most of the time.
Yeah, I agree with you. The other question is, when you did clustering, so what kind of clustering approaches did you try? Did you try any basic clustering approaches like hashing, like DLSH, or did you try more advanced clustering with a vector database that can further provide some explanations downstream? Did you try any graph clustering algorithms? Could you just give some commentary around that?
Yep. So if you want the TLDR version of this, is use something that is simple first, and then build on it. Don't be a perfectionist. Perfectionism is the opposite of progress. So don't tackle this as a perfectionist. Tackle it as an iterative kind of process, like as if you're a founder, you're building like a version 0.1 first, and so on and so forth. So I would tell you to start with either a k-means or a db scan. They would use essentially a tabular data. If you want to improve, you're exactly on point. So the graph kind of data structure and the graph kind of embedding that allows you to then use db scan is so much better. Because in the graph, you actually do what we call knowledge encoding. So if you remember in my slides, I had a little bit of a graph data structure here that focused more on CWE and CVE, because I noticed in my SOC, I would really like to have my tickets focused on vulnerabilities. Maybe because the way we action most of our tickets is, I don't know, we actually fix our software because we're a product company. But if I'm a manufacturing company or I'm an operations company, why the hell do I need this? I focus more on entities. Which of my sub-organizations is hacked? Which of my sub-entities, we acquired a lot of companies or something like that. Which of them actually has the problem? And I want an entity-based graph. So in this case, you're knowledge encoding, and you're telling the clustering what would you like to get out of it. And as you see things that you don't like, when you give it feedback, it can action it very easily, because it will just change the weights of edges versus nodes. It will change the weights of which attribute in the nodes or entities do you care more about? Do you care about business unit or same operating system or same IT leader, manager, admin, and so on and so forth? You can very easily tune this. Any more questions? Amazing questions, by the way. Thank you. Can we get a question here? Thank you. This is amazing. You guys can shout it out, and I can repeat it if you want.
We're recording, so.
I just wanted to clarify. So you wrote Hugging Chat and Attack Llama. Those are things. Those are.
Yes. So Attack Llama is just the name that I gave it. But I just went to Hugging Chat like any normal person, and I just gave it a few links to make it focus more on certain areas when it's doing its search. So in Hugging Chat, you can go into the settings and you can give it certain things. So this one, for instance, doesn't go online at all, and it has a very low temperature relatively. So in here, I just kind of like gave it a system prompt and that was it. But in this case, while I was creating this, and again, it doesn't take a data scientist to do this, that's why I showed this early, because you can do it on your phone. You don't even have to have a laptop. That's how user-friendly it is. This is 2024, like it doesn't need a PhD in data science. And I gave it the links that I thought were interesting. So you can see in my links, I have a shit ton of links, but the links are focused on the sources that I wanted to look at. So bug crowd, VariantDBs, W directory, like Rocket Reach, even like for recon on the attribution, URL void, like all kinds of essentially links that I thought were interesting to my essentially use case, right? My use case was threat intel attribution, software deobfuscation. I wanted to figure out what's the attack in any kind of event that I give you, any kind of PowerShell code that I give you, anything that I give it this assistant, you better give me an attack technique that is relevant. And this is a public bot. I can share the link. I can put it on my LinkedIn. This is a public bot, and there's a million other public bots out there. And you can look at my settings. Nothing here is like a secret per se. I can activate it and I can go talk to it. This is the direct URL, system instructions. You can see my prompt. There is no secret at all in this case. And then if I dislike the command plus that I used here, I can use another one, right? Like, and it's all via UI. If you want another UI, something else that you want to do local because you don't trust Hugging Chat, Olama.
Okay, and then my second question is, you know, from an operational perspective, as someone who manages like a SOC team, how do I tell them to use these tools? What's the tactical? Do they go to these? Is this something we install ourselves, or do we use it online, or how? I'm just trying to understand tactically.
Yeah.
How
so
do we make
Hugging Chat is
use-
hosted online.
Or can we link it to our SIM? Is that what you're proposing, and that it's its own system that spits out something at us? I'm kind of lost on.
I think I
that
understood your
connection.
question. You're saying where does this sit? It depends on your use case, but if you want the most generic use case, right at the SIM, you have essentially an exporter to S3 buckets. You probably have it already for cold archives for compliance, but if it's sitting in an S3 bucket, the world is yours. Because if it's sitting in an S3 bucket, you can just open Cloud Shell and tell it access this S3 bucket for free compute and do whatever you want with it. Or you can start a SageMaker, you can start a million things. One of your engineers can probably do this like a sysadmin kind of thing, and they don't have to write the code for data science. They just have to operate on that humongous database of JSONs, and they can do a lot of things if you give them the capacity. Now you can give them some directions. So you can tell them, listen, like you're gonna have a lot of heterogeneous data sources here because our SIM is sending stuff, our syslogs are sending stuff. We have a lot of different things that are going out there, and that is completely fine. So you can go to our GitHub, and you can go to the data mapper model, for instance. And this LLM is going to quickly map everything into one data model. And now all of these JSONs are just like one data model based on this LLM that will map everything for you and guess essentially the integrations. And now you have essentially some sort of a CSV that they can do with Hugging Chat or with Olama if they want a local instance. If they don't want a local instance, it's fine. None of this is sensitive information. It's the rule set of whatever you use. Use CrowdStrike, use Palo Alto, use whatever you use. Get the rule sets from the SIM. Give these rule sets to any LLM that you trust. They're probably less than 1,000. You can actually task one of your senior people to just sit down and give it techniques on an Excel sheet, and that would be the best use of their time. And this CSV is now going to go back to the SIM, and it will enrich everything. So on the SIM, when they are doing notable alerts, they will just do group by whatever this exists in the data model, and they will add a data model for technique. And you should probably do this as well for entities attributes. Like you probably don't want everything in the CMDB. Nobody has a perfect CMDB, but at least tell me when was the last time it was patched? What software is running on this? Who is the leader of this? When we want to call someone and tell them, is this fine? Is this a pen test? Is this a vulnerability? Who's the leader? If you have these very little things per entity and these very little techniques per alert, now your SIM is a treasure trove of information. Take that information, which is already on S3, give it to the simplest clustering model your team can use, not write from scratch, use. And at its worst iteration, it's more valuable than them sitting there and maybe they investigate, maybe they don't. Because when they find a cluster that they like, that's already a blueprint for documentation of a guideline that you want in investigations. They're already saying, oh, when an EDR happens, we probably should go look at the PowerShell commands before it. I didn't really think about that, but now, you know what? I'll actually write this into a playbook or a detection, because then you're not tracking them by time, you're tracking them by how many things can you improve in the process. In every ticket, how many contributions do you have to our content? Did you contribute to our content? Did you, in this ticket when you closed it, did you suggest a better tuning for the detection, a better tuning for the playbook? Did you suggest a new one? And if they did, fantastic. If they don't, encourage them and give them an LLM to support them while they're doing this. But make sure that their LLM is not creative. 100%, yeah. But the S3, I think, is the best way. You already have a cold backup, and it's cheap. If you want to delete it, you can delete it, but it's the cheapest storage in the world.
We have one more.
I'd love to get 1 million more.
In terms of the clustering, I'm wondering about whether you're doing smart clustering or weighted clustering.
Ooh.
So that, maybe we know, hey, this particular IP address, whenever that's involved, this seems to be tied to that attack. It might not be the only factor, but it could also be anything involving a certain port number, or I don't know what else you could be doing in terms of weighting, or smart clustering, where it's like, hey, if it's got 8 things in common, it's more likely to be similar than. So are you doing anything like that?
Yes, I love it. This is a fantastic question. So for most people, start slow. For the people that are interested in getting better stuff, I don't want to make it sound complicated for the people that didn't start it yet. So always start slow, because the smallest kind of element of clustering you have there is valuable. It will reduce false positives, and most importantly, it will reduce data. You have a problem of big data, reduce data. Even if it's bad at reduction, it's consistent at reduction, and it's explainable at reduction. So anyways, to answer your fantastic question, your question was, how do we make sure our clustering is smarter than regular? For instance, is there some sort of knowledge encoding in similarity? For instance, is port 80 as close to 81 as it is close to 79? Numerically it is, but as a cybersecurity expert, no. 80 and 81 are alternative HTTP ports, 79 is garbage. So I can come up with an embedding or an encoding where essentially, and again, you can do this with ChatGPT. I can go to ChatGPT. I want to show you how easy this is, because I don't want to ever sound like a data scientist, like a robot. Develop an encoder for ports that give them an encoded value representing their ports association, where alternative ports are closer to each other than ports that are not servicing the same protocol, right? And it will give you a function like that. I don't even have to look, because I know it will make up something. So immediately it goes for some alternative ports, right? It didn't even get you the correct port alternatives, but HTTPS has 8443 and a bunch others. Now that I have this example, I will make them have closer numerical values to each other, where I no more call 8080, I call 81. I no more call 8181, I call it 1. And I call 79 106. It's a way for the machine to understand your knowledge. You don't have to worry about how we talk to the machine. You just worry about your knowledge. And if you tell your users, or if you tell ChatGPT, give me a list of all common ports and their protocols. Give me all of the alternative ports. Boom. Give me an encoder. Hopefully it actually gave me the code. Yeah, it did some sort of code for the encoding. I didn't check it, but yeah, it looks like it did. So all of the stuff in FTP is now called 3. So no more 20 and 22, 21 and 22, I just call them 3. So they have the exact same numerical value, which means exactly what you're talking about. There is now some sort of knowledge that we encoded to this clustering, and now this clustering is just not doing crazy stuff. I can also go in there and tell it HR is very close to business unit corporate safety. I can go and tell it our sub-organization XX Analytics is very close to XX Solar Power, because they got acquired from the same company, and they have similar systems. This subnet and this subnet are very similar because they both have same OT systems, whatever it is, right? And I can give that knowledge that is stuck in the brains of your analysts, stuck in the brains of the folks that actually know the operation, and I can give it to the data so that it will outlive all of us. It will outlive your documentation, and it's easier to do than your documentation, and it will be the true legacy that enables your people not to acquire products, but even if they acquire products, they go into these products discussions very intelligently. When they go talk to SecureNX or DropZone or whatever, they tell them, here's my use case. I actually know how to test this. Like, are you going to give me tickets that have stuff from the same business unit? And these vendors would love to take these knowledge bits in their info gathering sheet and use it for you as an MSSP, as a vendor of a product or whatever. But have the knowledge, feed it to the clustering, you're completely on point, and the clustering is going to be smart. The other question that you asked was what kind of algorithms as well. dbScan and k-means are fine, but as I said before, like you can also use the data structure to encode the knowledge and kind of cheat a little bit. What do you want? And in that case, you can kind of make sure the cluster goes the way you want it to go. But again, there is a piece that I wanted to talk about at the very end about supervised learning, which is very, very important. If you already have your tickets historically, don't start with unsupervised learning. Start with a classification problem. Like classify things and show the analyst the historically relevant tickets that were closed before that you trust. Of course, not all tickets. You can filter the tickets by who do you trust and who do you not. And use that as a classification problem data set. Any other questions? I love this room, by the way. You guys are freaking brilliant. Like, these are amazing questions. Give me more. The more, the merrier.
One more quick one, if y'all have it. We could do one more quick one.
Come on.
I like it. They're awake. They're awake.
Come on. We got a lot of innovators.
Come on. Come on.
A lot of good
come
brainstormers here.
Oh, here we go.
Right?
Bringing up the old tickets, as you were saying, could you not add those back into the LLM to increase the learning for any future analyst that might come across a specific investigation?
It's a very smart idea. I would definitely do that in a RAG, but it would be like a really overkill to use an LLM for this, because an LLM can do a lot more. And in my limited use case or my limited thinking here was simply a classification problem, while an LLM can grasp a lot more than just a simple classification problem. I consider an LLM a magic box that I can never audit. And in that case, I wanted to be able to audit more. So if I have a shitty classifier, like the SVM classifier, like the most basic classification problem, model, I can very easily trace what is going on if I go to ChatGPT and I tell it, listen, ChatGPT, here's the code of the model. This model keeps on telling me stuff that I don't understand. Can you tell me what's wrong with it? ChatGPT would tell me, by the way, run this code, and you would know which part of your data contributed to that classification that you don't like. And now I have complete auditability that I can go and be like, oh, this data I thought was all nice, but this guy messed up this one ticket. Let me just delete it. And it's very easy to explain and audit small models than an 8 billion model running on a humongous GPU that is going to obviously cost me more. So if ideally I also want to be cost efficient, so that these kind of programs don't get killed when your leader is like, oh, we got to cut budget because there is a recession. Because you're not actually using a GPU. It's like, dude, like this is like $5 a month on AWS to run like a clustering algorithm every single day if you want. Like, it will never get cut. It's a legacy that you leave, and it will never get cut. Especially if you have like the historical data, a small classification problem allows your team, if they are not data scientists, to do very easy explainability, traceability, transparency, auditability of what is wrong when something goes wrong, and they can very easily delete the data. They can give feedback. Feedback for humongous models is very hard. Like, can you actually tell an LLM, don't do this again? I don't know, it's kind of hard, even as a data scientist. But if I'm just an intern at your company and you tell me do a basic classification problem, I would be stoked. And every time I get like an explainability piece from ChatGPT, I will try it and I will get success. And you now have an employee or an intern that is looking forward to innovate, because you're giving them easy models to work with and they can see their success in every step. If you give them an LLM, they have to read the paper and they don't really have a lot of success and they hit brick walls and they're like, I don't know.
All right, give it up for Ez. Smart guy. Talk all day about that. Thank you so much. Next talk is in